You've been doing everything right. You text back quickly. You show up fully. You pour yourself into this connection. And still, somehow, he pulls away. Not because he doesn't care. Not because you did something wrong. But because something deep inside him was wired, long before you ever met, to treat closeness like a threat. And here's what nobody tells you. The harder you chase, the faster he runs. The more you need, the more he disappears. It feels like you're losing your mind, like you're in a relationship with a ghost who only becomes real when you stop reaching for him. You start questioning yourself, your worth, your sanity. You wonder if love is supposed to feel this exhausting. But what if I told you there's one thing, one specific shift in how you show up, that makes an avoidant man not just stay, but actually open up, lean in, and choose you with everything he has? Not manipulation, not games, not pretending you don't care. Something rooted in psychology so deep it bypasses his defenses entirely. Something that works because it speaks directly to the wound he's been carrying his whole life. Stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, everything is about to make sense. To understand why avoidant men behave the way they do, you first have to understand that avoidance isn't a personality flaw. It isn't coldness. It isn't a lack of love. It is a survival strategy that was built in childhood, brick by brick, in response to an environment where emotional needs were either ignored, mocked, punished, or simply never met. Think about a small child who cries and no one comes, or a child who expresses excitement and gets dismissed, or a child who says, "I'm scared," and gets told to toughen up. That child learns something devastating, that needing people leads to pain, that vulnerability is weakness, that love is conditional, and the safest way to keep it is to never fully ask for it. So they adapt. They become self-sufficient, hyper-independent. They learn to suppress their emotions so effectively that eventually they can barely feel them anymore. And the truly heartbreaking part, they grow up, they meet someone wonderful, someone like you, and their nervous system still treats intimacy like danger. Not because they want to push you away, but because closeness activates a deep unconscious alarm that says, if I let this person all the way in, I will be hurt. I will be abandoned. I will be too much or not enough, and they will leave. So before they can be left, they leave first, or they create enough distance to feel safe, or they shut down emotionally and leave you feeling completely alone while standing right next to them. This is the cycle. And if you've been in it, you know exactly how maddening it feels because the connection is real. The chemistry is real. The moments where he opens up, even just for a second, are real. And those moments keep you holding on, waiting for him to finally let you in all the way. Now here's where it gets interesting, and stay close, because this is where most relationship advice gets it completely wrong. Most people, when they sense an avoidant pulling away, respond with more love, more affection, more reassurance seeking, more questions, more intensity. And that feels logical. If someone is moving away from me, I should move toward them, right? But with an avoidant man, that instinct, however loving, however well-intentioned, triggers exactly the response you're trying to prevent. Because to his nervous system, your pursuit isn't love. It's pressure. And pressure is what he spent his entire childhood learning to escape. The more you pursue, the more his system says danger, engulfment, loss of self, and he retreats further and you pursue harder. And now you're both trapped in this devastating dance where neither of you is getting what you actually need. This is called the anxious avoidant trap, and it is one of the most painful relationship dynamics in existence because both people genuinely care, both people are genuinely suffering, and neither person fully understands why the cycle keeps repeating. But here's what I want you to understand right now. And this is the thing that changes everything. You are not powerless in this dynamic. You are not at the mercy of his attachment style. There is something you can do, something grounded in psychological research, something that goes against every anxious instinct in your body. But when you do it consistently, it doesn't just pause the cycle, it rewires it. It creates something his nervous system has never felt before in a romantic relationship. And that unfamiliar feeling, That specific emotional experience is exactly what makes an avoidant man not just stay, but transform. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah. She'd been seeing a man named Daniel for about 8 months. Incredible chemistry, deep conversations on the rare occasions he opened up. But every time things started to feel real, he'd go quiet, cancel plans, take days to respond to messages. She'd reach out more, he'd pull back more. She'd ask if something was wrong. He'd say nothing was wrong, but somehow feel even further away. She was exhausted, confused, and starting to believe that she was the problem, that she was too needy, too emotional, too much. She started reading everything she could about avoidant attachment. And then someone told her about this one shift, and she was skeptical because it felt completely counterintuitive. It felt like giving up, like not caring, like abandoning the relationship she'd worked so hard to build. But she tried it, not as a game, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a genuine, deeply intentional shift in the way she was showing up. And within 3 weeks, Daniel did something he had never done in 8 months of dating. He called her, unprompted, no reason, just to hear her voice. He told her he'd been thinking about her, and eventually, slowly, vulnerably, he told her something that made everything make sense. He said, "With you, I finally feel like I don't have to perform, like I can just exist, and that's enough." That sentence, that's the key, that's the entire thing. Let me explain what she did. The one thing that melts an avoidant man, truly melts him at the deepest level of his psychology, is being given the experience of unconditional, pressure-free acceptance, not approval, not validation, not even love in the conventional sense, acceptance. The feeling that he can be exactly where he is, exactly who he is, without that being a problem that needs to be solved. Without it meaning you're disappointed in him, or that you're about to leave, or that there's something fundamentally wrong with the connection. Here's why this is so powerful. His entire internal world is built around the belief, the deeply conditioned belief, that if people really knew him, if they saw his needs, his fears, his mess, his emotional walls, they would leave, or worse, they would use it against him. So he preemptively protects himself. He controls the closeness. He manages the intimacy like a dial he never lets get too high. Because high intimacy feels like high risk. And his entire nervous system is optimized for risk avoidance when it comes to love. But what happens when someone refuses to react the way his nervous system predicts? What happens when he pulls away and instead of chasing, instead of protesting, instead of showing hurt, you simply remain calm, warm, grounded, still clearly interested, still clearly present, but not dismantled by his distance, not crushed, not frantic, not making his emotional unavailability the center of the relationship's entire gravitational field. What happens is something extraordinary. His nervous system starts to receive new data. Data that says, this person is different. This person's love is not conditional on my performance. This person doesn't need me to be fully open right now in order to stay. And that data, that repeated, consistent experience of safety, begins to do something that years of trying to get through to him never could. It begins to lower the wall, not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, authentically, at a pace that his nervous system can actually tolerate. Because here's the truth about avoidant men that most people miss completely. They don't pull away because they don't want connection. They pull away because they want it desperately and are terrified of what wanting it costs them. Underneath the self-sufficiency, underneath the emotional armor, underneath the "I don't need anyone" exterior, there is a person who is starving for the experience of being truly known and truly accepted. They just never learned to believe it was safe. And you have the power to become the first person who actually proves that it is. Now let me be very clear about what this does not mean. This does not mean being a doormat. This does not mean accepting treatment that genuinely hurts you without addressing it. This does not mean abandoning your own needs or pretending you don't have them. That is not acceptance. That is self-erasure. And self-erasure actually makes things worse because it creates a dynamic where there's no real, grounded, equal person for him to connect with. You become a mirror of his avoidance rather than a stable presence that challenges it. What this means, the actual practice of this, is learning to regulate your own nervous system so that his distance doesn't automatically become your emergency. It means being able to hold space for his process without making his process mean something catastrophic about you. It means responding to his withdrawal not with increased anxiety or increased pursuit, but with a quiet, grounded confidence that communicates, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and I also trust myself enough not to fall apart when you need space. That combination, that warmth plus that groundedness, is something an avoidant man has almost certainly never experienced. Because the women before you probably did one of two things. They chased, which confirmed his belief that intimacy leads to engulfment, or they eventually gave up and left, which confirmed his belief that people always leave. But you, when you show up with warmth and with self-possession simultaneously, you break both of those patterns. You become genuinely novel to his nervous system. And novelty, in attachment science, is one of the most powerful triggers for relational change. Let's talk about what this looks like in actual, practical, day-to-day behavior. Because theory is one thing, but this has to be lived. The first place to apply this is in how you respond to his silence. When he goes quiet, when he takes a day to respond, when he cancels plans, when he seems to be somewhere far away even when he's right next to you, your natural impulse is to fill the silence, to ask what's wrong, to probe, to reassure yourself that the connection is still intact. And that impulse comes from love. But to him it reads as surveillance, as pressure, as proof that your emotional state is contingent on his behavior. Instead, and this is deeply difficult, so I want you to honor how hard this is. Instead, you let the silence be silence. You go live your life with genuine fullness. You do the things that matter to you. You spend time with the people who fill you up. You invest in your own growth, your own joy, your own becoming. Not as a strategy to make him miss you, although that often happens, but because you are a whole person with a rich inner world that doesn't begin and end with his availability. And when he sees that his pulling back didn't pull your whole world apart, something shifts in him because now you're not a person who needs him. You're a person who chooses him. And for an avoidant man, being chosen freely, without desperation, without condition, is an entirely different emotional experience than being needed. There's a crucial difference between being needed and being chosen that I want to sit with for a moment, because I think it's central to everything. When you need someone, there's an energy of dependency that can feel to an avoidant like a cage. Like if he doesn't show up in exactly the right way, something terrible will happen to you. And by extension, to the relationship. That level of emotional responsibility is overwhelming to someone who already struggles with the vulnerability of caring. But when you choose someone, when your happiness clearly does not depend on their constant presence, but you still genuinely want them there, that is intoxicating to an avoidant because it's safe, because it's respectful of his autonomy, because it doesn't demand anything from him except his authentic presence, which is, ironically, the one thing he's most capable of giving when he doesn't feel pressured. This is why doing the inner work on your own attachment is not just self-improvement. It is literally the most relationship transforming thing you can do. When you are secure in yourself, when you know your value doesn't fluctuate based on how much attention someone is giving you, you stop participating in the anxious avoidant dance. And an avoidant cannot sustain his avoidance when there's nothing to avoid. When there's no pursuit, there's no need to flee. And in the absence of the chase, many avoidant men for the first time start to feel the actual pull of the connection, the actual wanting. And that wanting, when it's safe enough to feel, when it's not immediately followed by someone running toward them intensely, actually moves them towards you. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you right now, a thought that says, but shouldn't I be able to express my needs? Shouldn't I be able to say when I feel disconnected? Doesn't pulling back mean I'm just playing games? And the answer to all of that is yes, absolutely. Expressing your needs is not only allowed, it's essential. The difference is in the energy with which you express them and the timing. There's a world of difference between, I've been feeling a little disconnected lately, and I'd love some intentional time together this week, said calmly, warmly, from a place of self-possession, and why have you been so distant? Did I do something wrong? Are you losing interest? Said from a place of anxiety, with the undercurrent of please reassure me that I'm not about to lose you. The first communicates a need. The second communicates a fear. And an avoidant man who is already hypervigilant to emotional pressure responds to the fear, not the need. He hears an alarm, not an invitation. So the practice here isn't suppressing your needs. It's developing the internal stability to express them cleanly, without the layer of panic that triggers his flight response. And developing that stability is the work. It's not easy. It might be the hardest thing you do, but it is the work that changes everything, not just with him, but in every relationship you'll ever have. Let's talk about one more dimension of this that doesn't get discussed enough, and it is the dimension of genuine curiosity. Not performed curiosity, not strategic curiosity. Genuine, deep, interested curiosity about who he actually is, not who you need him to be, not who you're hoping he'll become, but who he actually is right now, including his walls, including his contradictions, including the parts of him that still don't know how to let you in. Avoidant men, almost universally, report feeling unseen in relationships. They feel like they're always being evaluated against a standard, being compared to an ideal version of a partner that they're perpetually failing to be. And here's the painful irony of that. They're the ones who created the distance that makes impossible for anyone to truly see them. But the feeling is real. The longing to be seen without judgment is real. And when you approach him with genuine curiosity, when you ask questions not to extract information or prove a point, but because you are actually fascinated by the complexity of this person, he feels it. It's a different energy entirely. It's one of the few energies that can penetrate the wall without triggering its defenses. Because curiosity isn't a demand. It's an opening. It says, I want to understand you, not fix you. I'm interested in your experience, not threatened by it. I can hold what you tell me without using it against you or making it mean something about us. And for a man who's spent his whole life being his own sole custodian of his inner world, who has never trusted anyone enough to let them inside, that kind of curiosity is like water in a desert. It's unfamiliar enough to surprise him, and it's safe enough to actually receive. What you're really doing when you practice all of this together, the grounded presence, the non-reactive warmth, the space without abandonment, the needs without fear, the curiosity without agenda, is creating something for him that didn't exist in his formative experiences. You're creating what psychologists call a corrective emotional experience. A moment, and then another where intimacy doesn't end in pain, where vulnerability isn't punished, where being imperfect and guarded and still figuring it out doesn't mean losing the person in front of you. And corrective emotional experiences are how attachment patterns change, not through arguments, not through ultimatums, not through trying to convince someone logically that they should be more open, but through lived, repeated, embodied experiences of safety. The nervous system learns the same way it was traumatized, through experience. And you can be the experience that teaches him something new, not because you've sacrificed yourself on the altar of his healing, but because you've done the work to become genuinely secure enough that your presence is, by nature, healing. Now, I want to speak for a moment to the part of you that's tired, because if you've been in this dynamic for any length of time, there is a very real exhaustion that lives underneath the love. A tiredness that comes from always being the one who's trying, the one who's reaching, the one who's doing the emotional labor of keeping the connection alive. And I want to say this clearly, that exhaustion is valid. What you've been doing is genuinely hard. Loving someone who doesn't yet know how to receive it fully is one of the most quietly difficult experiences a person can have. But I also want to say this. Everything you've been doing that's been exhausting you, the chasing, the over-explaining, the anxiety, the constant monitoring of his moods and messages, none of that has been working. Not because you haven't been trying hard enough, but because that approach, however loving, is fundamentally incompatible with how an avoidant heals. The exhaustion isn't the cost of loving him. The exhaustion is the cost of fighting against how love actually works for someone like him. When you make the shift, when you stop running the race that was never going to get you to the destination, the exhaustion lifts. Not because the relationship suddenly becomes easy, but because you're no longer working against yourself. You're no longer burning energy trying to drag someone toward a connection they'll only ever walk toward voluntarily. You're creating the conditions for something real, and then you're trusting, truly actually trusting, that if he is capable of rising to meet you, he will. And if he's not, that truth will reveal itself too. And you'll have the wholeness and self-respect to act accordingly. Because here's what nobody wants to say, but what has to be said. This approach, this beautifully, courageously grounded approach, is not a guarantee. Some avoidant men are at a place in their healing where they simply cannot yet give you what you need, no matter how safe you make it. And if that's the case, no amount of perfect behavior on your part will change that timeline. His healing is ultimately his responsibility. His willingness to do the inner work, to face the wounds he's been running from, to choose connection over comfort. That is his journey, not yours to manage. What you can control is the quality of your own presence, the depth of your own security, the clarity of your own standards. And by doing this work, by becoming someone who offers genuine safety without self-abandonment, you do one of two things. You either create the conditions for him to finally truly open up, or you outgrow the relationship with so much self-respect intact that you walk into the next one carrying none of the wounds this one might have given you. Either outcome, when you look at it honestly, is a form of winning. There are men right now today who are in loving, deeply connected partnerships with partners they once pushed away relentlessly. Men who, if you'd asked them 5 years ago, would have told you they didn't really need anyone. Men who are now the first to say that the relationship they almost lost, the one they kept retreating from, is the one that changed their life. And the turning point for almost all of them was the same. It wasn't an ultimatum. It wasn't their partner finally losing patience and erupting. It was a moment, quiet, unspectacular, where they realized the person they kept running from was still there, still warm, still whole, not waiting desperately, not falling apart, but genuinely, consistently, mysteriously still there. And in that moment, the story they told themselves, that love always costs you your freedom, that closeness always ends in pain, stopped feeling as true as it always had. That moment of doubt in the old story is the crack where the light gets in. And you can be the person who holds the space open long enough for that crack to appear. Not by being perfect, not by being endlessly patient in a way that erodes you, but by being so genuinely, robustly yourself, so clearly someone who loves fully and also honors herself fully, that his nervous system has no choice but to take notice. This is the work. This is the one thing. It isn't a trick. It isn't a script. It isn't something you do once and wait for results. It is a way of being, a daily, sometimes moment-to-moment practice of choosing your own groundedness over the seductive pull of anxiety, of choosing warmth over withdrawal and stability over reactivity, of becoming, in the deepest sense, the safe person that he never had and always needed. And here's what I'll leave you with, because this is perhaps the most important thing of all. In doing this work for the relationship, you are also doing it for yourself. The security you build, the nervous system regulation you develop, the self-worth you reclaim, those things belong to you forever. They don't go away if this relationship doesn't work out. They become the foundation of everything you build from here. You become someone who loves powerfully without losing herself. Someone who can hold space without disappearing into it. Someone who understands attachment not just intellectually but in her bones, and who uses that understanding not to fix other people, but to show up as the most whole, most real version of herself. That person, the one you're becoming right now, just by engaging with these ideas seriously, that person is magnetic in a way that has nothing to do with strategy, and everything to do with truth. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer. Think about the dynamic I've described today. Think about the moments in your own experience where you pursued and he retreated, where you chased and the connection thinned. And then think about a moment, even one single moment, where you were fully in your own energy, fully present with yourself, and he unexpectedly moved toward you. I believe if you're honest, you can think of at least one. And if you can, then you already know somewhere inside you that this works. So here's my question for you. And I genuinely want to know, what is the hardest part of staying grounded for you when someone you love pulls away? Is it the silence, the self-doubt, the fear of losing them, or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments, because your answer might be exactly what someone else reading this needed to see today. And understanding your specific trigger is the first step to doing something about it.